received a letter from one of the people who reads my newsletter, and he said, "Dear Deborah, in your conversations with medical doctors, have you ever heard what the biggest obstacles are to research that would better illuminate the causes of RSI? Do researchers and the people who fund them not see any marketable solutions to RSI, thus no incentive to research it? Or that necessary diagnostic and treatment technology, whatever it might be, is so far out of reach that there's still no point in talking about it? In terms of things that would help us better understand RSI, I am thinking of not quite science fiction level imaging technology that would allow researchers to thoroughly image fascia and thus definitively establish the role of fascia in RSI, or ways to reliably identify trigger points as opposed to just debating whether or not they exist. So here to answer this question is the best expert I know. He's our medical expert, Dr. Robert Markison. So should I read, Dr. Markison, the beginning again so we can
Sure.
address those 3 paragraphs?
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead.
In your conversations with medical doctors, have you ever heard what the biggest obstacles are to research that would illuminate the causes of RSI? Well, of course, I'm thinking that nobody wants to fund it, but what do you think?
Well, I think product makers are first and foremost responsible if there's a broad end user base, all sizes, ages, body weights, and health conditions. They're responsible, as would be a shoemaker, to assure rightness of fit, as would be a tailor of suits to assure rightness of fit, proper shoulder curvature and everything allowing for movement. And if I were going to make something for mass consumption and end users of all types, then I'd recognize the 2 tenets of industrial design, which are: 1, adjustability. You get a little fat, you let out your belt, you've got some extra little holes for the belt. Or 2, so adjustability or choice. Not everybody wears a size 6 AAA shoe. And so they're responsible for, especially something that's anatomy intensive, uh, dissecting the human body at all ages. And I was blessed in San Francisco to have access to all the unclaimed dead and dissected them from head to fingers and toes, teaching, as I have done for decades, form, function, fit, and failure avoidance. And so a maker should be researching on a daily basis, even down to the nitty gritty of human anatomy, dissection. And we remember that Da Vinci and Michelangelo asked the Pope if they could dissect the dead in the interest of better 2- and 3-dimensional rendering. There were artists without medical degrees chronicling who we are and how we're put together. So fast forward to the makers of computers who make things that look about the same as they did when they hit desktops 30 plus years ago. They haven't done their homework. Number 2, the hand is undertaught. The upper limb is undertaught in curricula in medical schools. The wonderful organs of popular fiction, the brain, the heart, they're taught and must be taught. The central organs are taught, must be taught. The humble hand was the province of slavery, the amanuensis, the person who did the work without having a name. And so they've cast off the magnificent hands in favor of other worthy, but not more worthy body parts, because obviously we do our work, do our play, and remain independent living based on brain-hand linkage in addition to other body functions. And so you have a cohort of graduates from med school, all very bright and so on, underschooled in trouble between brain and fingertips. So if you're underschooled, you may not pinpoint things that do need research, either at clinical level, bench science, development of imaging techniques, and so on. But with that, I have to say there is a thirst and hunger among the end users, as in the questioner here, to know more. There isn't a single pill. And obviously, in getting well from RSI, it's multifactorial. I would ask how people sleep, if it's a restorative sleep. If they snore, are they using CPAP? Do they have proper vitamin D and other vitamin levels? Do they have a thyroid condition, prediabetes, diabetes, other endocrinopathy? What medications do they take, singly or in combination? And so the whole panoply of are they on a low lectin or at least gluten-free diet to avoid intestinal weakness, porosity, and leaky gut? Are they taking probiotics to maintain a healthy microbiome? So all these things come together, and then the actual devices in use, the patterns of use, whether you're a percussive typist or whether you type with a light touch like a leaf falling on a pond in autumn, how do you approach any work? Are you ergonomically set up? Continuously adjustable split and tilt keyboard, a mouse, foot pedals to do single and multiple keystrokes, voice recognition, cultivating language, even studying the orators, Churchill, Thatcher, Oliver Wendell Holmes, people who didn't say didn't say didn't say it's like, didn't say, you know, whatever. In other words, clarity of speech for the moment and maybe archivally so that you can do clean, clear voice recognition without sacrificing the hands. Increasingly, even the code writers who are writing computer code are now discovering some ways of doing it that are more body friendly. And that's in the offing as well. And I have a number of computer code writers who are doing very well with various techniques that could be subject of another talk. Then it's questions of action and repose as cycles. Do you take regular breaks? Do you have extra words in your word data? Do you have numbers on a spreadsheet that you could partially navigate with your voice and your feet to get spreadsheets done?
But
So,
this is
so
all about the user. And what he's talking about is for people who are seriously disabled from this. He wants to know if researchers and the people who fund them don't see any marketable solutions to RSI. So I think what this person is asking for is treatment that will actually get them back to normal
right, the
and the
treatment,
funding for that.
right. So
And if that's even possible or feasible, it, you know, from what I understand, it's way too complicated, but what do you think?
well, no, I don't think it's too complicated, but you see, it's a net loss for any government providing healthcare, either in a socialized medicine or Western framework, to focus on this because it's frankly not where the money is. Uh, and so sadly, you have accelerated Darwinism where people get hurt and can't keep up with the digital stream, especially under current remote homework situations. Funding uh, would be an acknowledgement that RSI exists. There are whole countries that deny that it exists. So that if they deny that it exists, why would they fund it? Uh, but the imaging and spin-offs from imaging of various body regions is going to be helpful in my own practice. Many years of ultrasonography to look at dynamic anatomy, normal and abnormal. Very simple, very quick, painless, inexpensive, very helpful to understand RSI and keep people out of trouble. Um, so one thing is the funding, and there's no magic pill to cure RSI, but again, what I mentioned earlier, the panoply of other variables, for example, no place for alcohol, which triggers inflammation. And, you know, these kinds of things uh, end up being very, very important. So somewhere between funding, better imaging, and self-tending, I think things are going to improve. I do expect that there will be some breakthroughs, and they'll come from odd corners that are not in the heart of the makers, the primary suppliers of devices.
My whole mission is to raise public awareness because so many people still have not heard of repetitive strain injury. They have no idea that anything seriously could go wrong with their hands. And they don't have, you know, the things that you're talking about, the careful keystroke, the reliance instead of on your hands, but on voice dictation, using foot pedals. All of these preventive measures should be common knowledge, and they're not. And that's why I'm doing this YouTube channel, is to raise public awareness so that people can prevent RSI because there is no magic pill for this. The final part of this guy's question is uh, something that, well, I'll just read it. In terms of things that would help us better understand repetitive strain injury, I'm thinking of imaging technology that would allow researchers to thoroughly image fascia and thus definitively establish the role of fascia in RSI, or ways to reliably identify trigger points. as opposed to just debating whether or not they exist. So
Well,
perhaps you can
I think
educate us.
part of it is fascia, but people like myself, trained in vascular and microvascular, know that it's about blood flow, and certainly fascia matters, but everything is part of a vascular tree. If we've got rich, warm, well circulated, well perfused hands, we're going to do well and be more bulletproof. If we don't, then you have to think, why not? Is it dehydration, cold exposure, nervous tension, or a combination of the three? Blood flow trumps just about everything. When it stops, we do. And so a great focus on circulation matters, which is really delivery of oxygen, cells, nutrients, and then waste washout. And so if we are a fit, worthy environment doing repetitive work, we'll probably get through it pretty well. The American College of Rheumatology defined the criteria for fibromyalgia by tender points testing, the occiput here, the trapezius here, second intercostochondral junctions, other places, and so on, down in the gluteus and the knees and so on. And so tender points testing is routine to check for fibromyalgia, which is itself kind of a controversial diagnosis. Some believe, some don't believe. But you have to really check for tender points if somebody's got a lot of trigger points. And then other trigger points may be focal outside of fibromyalgia, requiring local anesthetic injections and so on, and retraining and staying loose and all that kind of stuff.
You know, you were talking earlier, Dr. Markuson, about circulation, and I was thinking, gosh, we should all get up and take a walk. I mean, sitting is not exactly circulation inducing.
Absolutely right. No question about it. Blood flow matters, moving it around the body, rinsing the brain and tissues. Great idea. And again, I'm not for extreme exercise of any type. I did that in sports as a boy. But a good walk is a good thing. If you want to subtract gravity, get in a clean, warm pool, and that matters too.
Great advice. Great advice. I mean, maybe we can swim or do something whole body for work. If I always wish the tool designers would think of, you know, whole body movement rather than tiny little things that are done with tiny little muscles.
That's right.
Thank you so much for talking about this listener's question with us, Dr. Markuson. And we just can't wait to have you back on the show. We're going to be talking about other things soon. We always run out of time, but I want to thank you so much for being on the channel with us.
Well, it's a humble pleasure to be with you every time. And the message here is never, ever give up hope.
Absolutely. So we will continue on that hopeful note, and we'll all see you next time.